Video's on. Okay, good evening and welcome to tonight's June 7th Tilton Housing Standard Board meeting, time being 7 p.m. We'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we have one regular member absent tonight, so Ms. Trousdale is going to sit in as the alternate and give us a it's like 7-member board for the night. So we can go ahead and get started. According to our agenda, the first thing we're going to discuss is goals and objectives. Tim got us kicked off nicely last time, and we have some goals that he listed in the minutes, the May 3rd minutes. Mr. Joubert said that his goal for the ordinance is to create a document that will be educational for the property owner and the tenant, clearly define roles and responsibilities, provide the town with the necessary authority to inspect and enforce, and serve as a working document. So, what if folks have other things, any thoughts on goals and objectives for this, I guess not just this ordinance, but maybe this process?
I feel like those kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
If we met those goals, then we would have what we set out to do.
And then in further discussion with Tim, basically, I think maybe getting down to the specifics of what the ordinance should provide, some notes I had from a recent conversation. Create a requirement that all owners of rental housing register each unit with the land use office, create an inspection regimen, list basic areas of inspection criteria, and then this kind of a personal thought, or I'm not speaking necessarily for anyone other than myself, but with an explanation that the specifics are going to be handled by the officials, so that there's a basic delineation of applicable subject areas with the understanding that you can't fit the entire code book into our ordinance. Another goal, I think, this is a sort of something we mentioned as a secondary goal, but it seems something that I think seems important as I listen to the minutes, establishing a fee and fine structure. And it seemed like it was important to the group that there not be fees for some of the routine aspects of the inspection program. And then another goal I was thinking is to establish procedures for complaints and appeals and things like that. So those are some goals that I also came up with to add, but I think largely they're in line with what Tim said, just maybe getting into a little more detail.
I'd like to have us consider also, to have it be educational for property owners and tenants is good. If we could put it in language that's not terribly legalese, so that it's more easily comprehended than some of the other things that we've been reading, would be really nice.
All right. Does anybody else have any goals or objectives they'd like to see? Obviously, we can revisit this as we go.
If you have to do it, then I guess it would be to be more, friendly towards, more fair, I would say, towards landlords. I mean, if you're gonna throw the book of codes at them and they have no idea what those codes are, I'd say I would follow the fire department's lead of, if they don't know about it, you can't just slap them with fines and, notices. You gotta have some kind of plan that says, all right, this is not acceptable, and and what are you going to use as not? I mean, you're talking about some huge code book, or are you going off? You got to establish what codes you're talking about, or are you going to just go with the state minimum standards and elaborate on it? There's got to be some kind of something that's not and it has to be reasonable, it can't.
So, meaning there has to be a reasonable, like, enumeration of the factors that you might get fined on? Is that what you're saying?
If you, say we went with this and said you're, let's see, went with the minimum standards and you handed out the minimum standards, now if they violated the minimum standards, then I could see being a fine for that. But if you said, in that huge book that Catherine has, that there's this that's not a minimum standard, we've decided that we're gonna follow some other code and you're in violation. So you can't go,
I'm sure we can reference it, like.
well, you can reference it, but who would know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the fire department, you have no idea you need door closers, you don't. I can keep going back to that, cause it's easy.
Yeah.
And they don't come in and they're not like, oh, we're gonna, you know, slap you with a fine for it, because, you know, a lot of these other ones that I've read are like, oh, well, you go in and they're like, if they find violations and they cite that they're gonna, you know, they reference building codes and whatnots, and it's like, how would you know?
Mhm.
That-
Reference
right.
it very specific, like right down to the subsection.
If you
Reference
have
it to the sub.
this, this is, you know, the minimum standards you can hand that out when they register, and you can follow that. It's easily followed, and it's reasonable to follow these minimum standards. But if you're gonna start getting, you know, a little more in-depth about more than minimum standards, then, or following some, you know, she has a huge book of building codes, of something that,
Right.
you know, you wanna follow, then one, it has to be not cost effective, and that probably comes about with the appeals process, I would say, but, and two, if you don't know about it, you shouldn't fine somebody for that.
So, I know what the fire department currently does for multi-unit inspections is we'll go in, we'll do the inspections, we'll come up with the violations, we'll talk, educate, inform. We'll usually have a follow-up inspection within 30 days. Let's say there's something a little bit more major or more costly, we'll work with the property owner on what's called a plan of action. We've identified the issue, property owner, let's say the door closers. All right, maybe there's 16 doors that they have to put closers on. Maybe month one they do, you know, half, and month two they do the second half. So we have what's called an agreed upon plan of action that, you know, we agree on, we sign off on. So there's definitely something formatted that we can follow in the future. That's kind of how we look at it as far as the fire department goes. We think that's it's
Right.
fair. And sometimes it may go 6 months or a year for some things. We've identified that some things are costly, people can't afford it right now. If it's something major that, you know, is seriously affecting life safety, then it'll have to be done immediately. But we're willing to try to work with the property owners on it.
And I don't think you're far off from what the town of Tilton wants to do.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Have a certain period of time for them to
Right.
comply. Plus, we're gonna supply the landlords and the tenants with all the stuff ahead of
Right.
time, so
You
having a
can't
30-day,
supply them
you know.
with, like, building codes. You can't.
Because you're not gonna be able to do that on any level.
right.
Right.
On
Well, you can
any
supply
level.
them with minimum standards. You
When they
pay,
register, when they come in
Yeah.
to register,
You-
to have the packet or whatever, like we talked about before, you know,
Yeah.
the basic
if
information.
you're paying $20, they ought to get something.
Then, you know, to have the basic information for them, I think is fair. The rules, you know, the rules that we're gonna play by in this town to rent, to have those minimum standards.
But you have other standards to live by too. I mean, you have fire standards, you have building standards, you have the health standards, there are a lot of entities that you need to think about. So the expectation of not just going by the minimum standards there, would that lead them to an expectation that this is all I have to do? Well, it's not, because then now you have a building inspector that goes out unbeknownst to the health officer, or, well, actually, they work together, so that's an unfair statement, but, you know, they go out, and now there's some building code violations that they need to that has nothing to do with our ordinance, so they have to have really.
That's separate from the ordinance.
But maybe.
They already
if-
have
But
the
it's
power to
building
do
code,
that.
it's really not, it
Yeah.
kind of overlaps to what you're saying in the minimum. Are you giving them a false sense of You know,
We've done what we need to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
when they really haven't. So,
But we could put something in that packet that you're talking about that says be sure to follow these other, or.
reference them, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if you
reference them
referenced
so
it,
that,
then
they
it
would
be
know
up.
that they need to at least check in on that and make sure that they're okay.
I don't think that there should be any, this ordinance shouldn't serve to, right, if we say if it's not listed in the ordinance, then it's not something that's being evaluated during the inspection. We definitely don't wanna go that route.
I don't think anyone's saying that
Yeah.
that's what we wanna do.
Right.
But,
Good.
but, you know, like we had said before, to have a guidelines that, like the fire department guidelines like this is the kind of thing that people need to know. These are your
I
basic
think so,
rules. It's
yeah.
not saying.
Right, you got your different
Okay.
checklists here,
Right,
town of
the
Belmont, town
checklist
of Durham,
that
I
people
mean,
can see.
So,
like
so we're in
Belmont,
agreement
but-
that just because something's not listed in the ordinance doesn't mean it's not something that can be identified and called, you know,
Right,
for
because you
repair.
can't possibly list everything.
Okay,
But
good.
I think Lisa's point earlier was just because, it's not written there, it doesn't automatically mean that you're gonna get fined if you
Right.
have.
There's,
you know?
yeah, this, I
So they're two
I guess,
different- they're two
if
separate
everybody's okay, I
issues.
guess we should move from our goals and objectives to maybe the next part of our agenda, because I'm seeing, if you look at, Hanover on
I
their,
like Hanover's.
yeah, I do
Personally,
too.
I thought, I mean, it
Hanover's my
needs help,
favorite now.
but it,
Yeah.
it's a nice base.
It really is good.
Yeah.
I feel what Hanover lacks is, it doesn't have any minimum standards listed.
Well,
Um,
they reference the 48.
Right,
They
oh, true,
reference,
okay.
they accept,
okay,
they adopt and accept the reference
Okay.
of 48A.
Okay,
And then they reference that, they set minimum standards, and they also reference zoning ordinance. I mean, I take out
Mhm.
life safety codes, because we already, that's an overlap from
Yeah.
the fire department. But then, yeah, see, their declaration of purpose was really slim, and then I kinda liked Tilton's, like, I would kinda combine it, authority and purpose, because it was redundant.
I did
But,
not print them out.
I mean, if you go,
I did notes on
if you start at the beginning for your ordinance, I guess that's where we should probably start, is where do you wanna tell people like what, you know, what you're doing? And I think their first one they came up with was good, but I would just add, you know, do the authority and purpose, and it's all the same thing, cause and it had morals in there, and everybody's got different ones, so I
Yeah.
would not
Do you
list
have
that
like
there.
do you have I'm just wondering if instead of like all of us having our little, you know, marks all over this or whatever, do you have a laptop or something so that we can take ours and say, okay, we agree that 101.1, you know, like almost like a, like a union contract, we
yeah, we'll
say
be able
that
to do
this
that at
is
some
good?
point. I don't think we're ready for that, and I personally, I wouldn't wanna start with this one, if it were me.
Well, no, I wouldn't, I'm just saying this
Yeah.
very
But you know what I'm
first
saying, like this-
part of
this
this
is
one.
Yeah, but I wouldn't
So-
even, okay,
Right.
I mean, my vote would
Like-
be to not use that one
Well,
and to use
the rest of it.
Hanover.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Just
I'm
like-
just saying for the very first part where they came up with in accordance under revised statutes, and I put to adopt 48A, because this is very an easy read, you can just go and look at that. And then, which keeps it short, to enact an ordinance for maintaining quality rental dwelling units to protect the health, I took out morals, safety and general welfare of the citizens of town of Tilton, the following ordinance is enacted. And then you go, then I would move off of there and then go on to
But I
Hanover's.
don't, but I mean, I don't agree that that's the authorities, the opening statement we should use, so.
I don't either, I think morals is a very subjective
And
thing.
Well, I
she's,
crossed
she's
that
saying
off. I
to
said
take
I
that
would
one
take that
out, but
out.
I mean, I feel like there are better.
Yeah.
But I guess where I was going in transitioning, we were talking about not fining people for things they didn't know about. And if you look at number 10 on Hanover's, on page 2 of Hanover's ordinance, it starts to, and it combines with numbers 8 and 9, and it seems to sort of be trying to get at what we're talking about and saying that
But it
if
doesn't.
I know, and it doesn't
It
quite, but
doesn't.
it's the closest. I
Right.
feel like if we work off this,
If
and I
you
start.
if you add into that of known codes,
Uh-huh.
of known, right, like anything in
Right.
48A,
Yeah,
right, you could go off of this, but anything after that, you can't, because
Okay.
it's not reasonable.
But then, we can't have it that only the thing, there, someone, over time, we do wanna have it that someone could get fined for something that wasn't listed in
They can if they don't follow through, like on this,
Okay.
like on 8, it says written discovery, they shall
Yes.
allow 30 days, and then I added to that, or agreed upon terms
the.
based on, repairs and financial or whatever you wanna do, to add that in there, that it's not just set 30 days, it could be, like Tim
Right.
said, it could be longer.
Right.
It could be, right, and if they haven't done it after being notified in a reasonable term set, then you could go to the fine part of it.
Yep.
But not, and then, right, I didn't agree with you have to be inspected annually after that. I mean, if you go back and re-inspect it, and the re-inspection shouldn't cost anything if it wasn't a known factor either.
Well,
Well, I think what Tim said about working with people was really.
Right.
I'd like to see us be willing to work with the people in town to come up with a mutually agreeable schedule for them to make any repairs. And at that point, if you're negotiating that, that's when they would become aware, if they weren't already, of what's being expected of them.
Right.
so let's say, somebody, there's an inspection, 5 things are found. 2 of them were listed in the ordinance under the minimum standards. 3 of them weren't. So a report is returned to the owner with the 5 violations. Are we of the feeling that all 5 of those should be given some period of time to be corrected? Or that the 2 that were already listed, immediately a fine is, levied? Or what are people thinking on that?
I think
I'm
you,
confused on what, so the other 3 you're talking about, if it's not listed, then how are we finding it
do
a
we have
valid
examples of
violation?
something?
Because.
That's the whole point of us, is to have it listed, so.
Okay,
we
but
have
what,
our own-
I thought we agreed, sorry, I wanna, we agree that there are gonna be things that aren't listed in the ordinance that may still represent some code violation of some sort, right? Because we can't put all the codes into the ordinance, right?
No, we could put the title of the code.
Okay.
I think we should do that.
Okay.
If we're gonna
Okay,
hold them
so
accountable
let's say,
for it,
let's say if you went with Belmont,
Put it, title.
let's say so we drew from Belmont a little bit, we said applicable laws.
Good luck.
And applicable laws include minimum housing standards, applicable building codes, applicable fire safety code, electrical code, plumbing code, all that. If that says that in the ordinance, now essentially every single code is known,
Right.
even though it's not known. Are we saying all of those now, if we come to your house and those aren't, or if somebody goes, if the inspector goes to the house and those aren't all in order, then fines immediately kick in? Or are we saying the inspection goes, 3 of them were, actually spelled out, like you can't have a hole in the ceiling or something like that, and there's a hole in the ceiling. And then a few of the others are, some nuance, more nuance that's the average Joe may not know. Are we gonna say, is the thought of the board right now, and, obviously individually, I don't know how we have to do it now, but that, you get 30 days to correct all those things, or you get 30 days, or I like what you said, 30 days or some agreed upon time, kind of like what
Right.
Tim was saying with the action plan. All of those, you're not, no fines as long as you meet the 30 days, or the ones that were blatantly known, you're immediately getting fined for. I feel like in order to have,
I think, like on this one, you don't get fined when you first go in to do the initial inspection. Well, that says with no resulting fine,
Right.
no resulting violations, but then if you have a resulting violation, somebody's gotta go back and inspect. If it's a known one, then yes, you should get a fine for that. But if it's not a known one, then no. And then on the other hand, it raises the question of, did I know there was a hole in the ceiling? Right, I need to go in and inspect all my tenants,
Pre-inspection?
like pre-inspection?
And
Right,
the law doesn't allow
and you,
no
right,
one's to do
exactly,
that.
you can't unless the tenant lets you, and they may not. So
So,
then it's kind of,
Change that law.
it almost seems to me that maybe the best way to do something like this without getting too messy is that even if you find the violations in the inspection, there's some period of time that is, I don't know.
no, I think you're on the right
Yeah, I
path.
think so,
You
too.
find it,
Yeah.
you give them a certain amount of time to correct it, and if they correct it, it's fine. If they don't correct it, then you get the fine.
That's what HUD does.
Yeah.
Remember me saying that for the HUD, for Section 8 housing, they have a pretty cut and dry list of everything that they're going to check. And if you go in and they look at that list and there's a problem, they don't immediately say, oh, that's it, we've stopped paying rent for this tenant and this is it, this whole building's bad, we're not doing it. They say, these things are 7-day items, these things are 14-day items, and these things are 30-day items, and you have to fix them. Now, some of those items, I can just email the housing lady and say, yep, I replaced the cover on the outlet switch plate in the living room, just, okay, that's fine.
Like this one did.
So we have that, or they have those types of things available, and they don't, that's, how they do it. I think it's kind of fair.
May I say something? And I mean no disrespect to anybody, but this is the third, meeting that we've had, and it seems that we go around the table and discuss probably minimum standards or what an ordinance, and today we're saying Hanover is a very good baseline for a housing ordinance, which I feel it is. But we always seem to get hung up on fee. Do we charge a fee? Do we not charge a fee? When do we charge a fee? How do we charge the fee? Well, do they know? Do they not know? We shouldn't be concerned with that right now. We should be writing and creating an ordinance, and then at the end of it, then we look at the fee schedule, whatever, and then come up with that, because we're getting too hung up on fees and well, let's stay away from this because it's frightening to charge a fee. And I think that we should really figure out what we want for a housing ordinance, including, not including minimum standards. What do we want? The New Hampshire, the National Healthy Housing Standard has some excellent points in there too, as well, and incorporating them into something like the base of the town of Hanover's ordinance and adding and deleting. That's what I think that we should be working on. Set aside the fee thought for just a time being, and let's get the other stuff done. And I think once we do that and we know what we want for the town of Tilton, the fee issue will probably come a little bit easier at that point.
I think that there's some work that should happen at the end on the fees. However, I think that because we need to know how things are going to be handled if they don't show up in the ordinance, or is there going to be a fine for something that just isn't literally written out in the ordinance? This discussion we've had now, just a few minutes to talk about, okay, what if it's not written in there? How is that handled? That helps me to decide how much detail needs to be in the ordinance. So I agree that we shouldn't try and get this fee thing nailed down completely, but I wanted to get a general sense of how people were expecting elements that don't show up verbatim or word for word in the ordinance, how they would be handled fee-wise. But I think, you're right, Pat. We can't let ourselves get completely hung up on, specific dollar amounts or anything like that. I just think it's important for
But
the
you're
function.
right, the fee is part of the ordinance, it's a big part of it, the violations and the fees and the, when you're gonna do it, how you're gonna do it, and it's a part of it. I mean, for the most part, I think you can't list all those housing codes, and I don't even think a lot of them are reasonable as far as like you must maintain a air conditioner. There's some things that are just not reasonable. So
I
I
like
don't know.
the look of the Belmont's
Me
checklist.
too.
Yes.
Because it's
Yeah.
very clear, and it may not have everything in it, but it clearly goes, okay, here's what we're looking for in electrical, I like the format.
Right.
Here's what we're looking for in electrical, here's what we're looking for security, here's what we're looking for in the floors. I do think water damage is a little ridiculous unless it's gonna cause the floors to really warp, because water stains, and is that water damage?
Or maybe it's,
Or
they're
is it-
meeting rotten
Yeah, is
floors.
it rotten,
Right.
you know, a little more
Right,
clear on
clear on
something like that.
Yeah, so
but-
you can modify it.
Right, but I like the format that it's in.
I agree.
So, I look kind of at the ordinance and the checklist almost as two different things. The checklist is a part of the ordinance, but really the language is the ordinance. That's what's giving us the authority to do what we're doing. The verbiage that we're putting forth into this document. I think the checklist is the user-friendly part of it. So as we go through our language and we identify all the applicable laws, I think that's where you're gonna find, so, let's say, for example, we do a multifamily inspection, and, you know, there's one thing that's not in the code, we identify the life safety code that we're gonna follow, the health code, the building code, so we can go back and follow up and enforce that through that documentation. The checklist is, you know, when we come in every 3 years, every 5 years to do your multifamily inspection, these are the primary things that we're gonna look for during the process. I think those items on that list, you can easily identify a 30-day follow-up or whatever. That's easy. That checklist is the easy part. I think just getting, the wording is the appropriate. The checklist is the easy part.
I thought we talked about, last time or the time before, in the ordinance referencing the checklist, and then we can change, or, if you guys,
Yeah, I
if
agree
your code
with
came out, if a new code came out, then you update the checklist. So the ordinance doesn't have to be changed, because it's referencing a document that is fairly fluid, because the standards, minimum standards may change, and then you don't want to update your ordinance. So we talked about that at one point,
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, in my opinion, that we're clear, like, the checklist isn't the ordinance.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's a
Yeah, there's no
document within the
checklist
ordinance.
on
But I think it's a critical part
I-
of the whole thing, because people
For
feel
your
more
education.
comfortable with the ordinance if they see a checklist that tells them what you're gonna be looking for when you come into their apartment building.
And I agree, and that's the user-friendly part of it, but for, the legality of it and getting
Mhm.
everything on, it's the wording of the ordinance
Yeah.
is really what starts it all off.
I think
That's
that's,
the most critical, sorry. I think that's really the most critical part, is the writing of the
Mhm.
ordinance, because you have to get that to a point where the person understands what's going on, the enforcement of it, and the education portion of it as well. You are always, always, always going to have those that take something very little and try to work around it and find, no matter how many loopholes you have, they're gonna find it. Doesn't matter whether it's a parking ordinance, whether it's a bike ordinance, whether it's a trash ordinance, they're gonna find it. And but for the main purpose of this, we really need to have it as as educational as possible, as applicable to landlords and tenants, and so that we don't have any questions at the end of the day, what's required of them.
Pat, could I ask, do you feel that any of the models we've been working with are clear enough because none of them, most of them are 5-6 pages. Do you feel that any of them hit on the level of specificity that you feel needs to exist?
I think Belmont and Hanover were okay, but I think we needed to add something to them. I think after reading this long, drawn-out 61-page National Healthy Housing Standard, which they've picked from and got their ordinances, they've picked the information from here to get here. We can add or delete the parts that we don't need. I mean, we don't need to get into that it needs to be a 7-foot ceiling or requires, windows, things like that. We don't need to get into that. We need to have something so that when our employees go out there, that they know that the residents and tenants and landlords are in a safe environment out there.
And you don't need to do the fire life safety.
And I just spotted the
Because
tension on that one.
it's overlapping, right? We already have inspections, so now we get an inspection from the fire department, now we have an inspection from the town of Tilton, and, you know.
We don't have
our-
inspection as far as the health is concerned, Lisa, so.
But no, what I'm saying is you don't need to overlap in your
Right.
ordinance, you don't need to reference life safety because we already have it. We're already doing it, so we're gonna have two.
What
I think it's important though. to-
What-
Well,
what
they
I'm-
should
integrate them.
communicate, you guys
Right.
should communicate together.
But I think it's important to put that in here
The
though.
way that I personally envision this, and I haven't spoken to any of the other inspectors, and we kind of do it now anyways, is that we go to a multifamily where they're all together. So I don't think that would necessarily change when the ordinance is in place, so I would still be looking for life safety. Catherine would still be doing the health portion of it, and I was looking at the building portion of it. It just would be written a little bit different, so, the ordinance.
Catherine?
Well, just sitting here listening to you, when you go out, when I go out to look at the building, and sometimes I have to go on my own because I got a phone call and I've got to run. When you have somebody living in a basement, they have to have windows. They have to have some form of ventilation. So when you're writing this ordinance, when you're writing this information so people know what they have to provide, it's not gonna be the same. If you're in a basement apartment, it's gotta have windows. If you're upstairs, then you have to decide, do all the rooms in the apartment have to have some sort of ventilation? By code they do. But what's that gonna be? Is a mechanical ventilation gonna be okay in a bedroom that's in an inner room where there's no outside walls? Is that okay? Does that meet code? Those are the things you're gonna have to decide for this ordinance. I mean,
Well, that
you're,
would be-
you're talking about, you don't wanna write too much into it, but on the other hand, you have to think, do you want your landlord surprised? Because the codes that are out there are the codes that are out there, and they have to be enforced whether they're part of the ordinance you write or not.
Well, how did Durham, how did Hanover address that? How did Belmont address that? Did they just say?
Yeah,
They
I mean,
just say-
they talk
So why
about
can't we just do
applicable, like, well, Hanover says, the purpose of said inspection shall be to determine compliance with 48A14. However, should violations of other codes or ordinance be discovered during the course of such investigation, those violations may be prosecuted by the
So they
town. I mean, that's
That's what I'm
the-
saying. How
So
do these
they added
the
it.
other towns handle it? And why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? If we think that that addresses it,
Well, I think that, and again, that, to me, that gets back to the importance of that little short discussion we had at the beginning about fines and fees. Because if we're saying you're gonna get fined right off the bat for not meeting all the codes, then we better hand out a book with all the codes in it.
It won't pass.
If we're gonna say, you're gonna get your inspection every 3 years, you're gonna get a list of things that are in violation to this massive stack of applicable codes over here that we're not gonna make you read, and then you have 30 days or an agreed upon time to fix it, then, okay, there might be some surprises that the landlord incurs in saying, oh, when he gets that report, he or she says, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, but it's not, at least it's not a surprise that comes with a bill.
$50 bill, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So-
It's, okay,
Probably
well,
after.
knowledge, but ignorance of the law is no defense,
Right.
right? But it's also shouldn't be that you take this massive stack of rules that no one has access to and say, yeah, I got you, you didn't, page 1007, you missed that one.
So if like Catherine was saying, you go out and there's a basement apartment, it doesn't have proper ventilation, or if there's an inside bedroom and it doesn't have proper ventilation. But Catherine, if you went out there and found that, like if I had just bought a new building, I'd come in and register, and you come out there and check it out, I mean, I would think that it would be reasonable for you to say, oh, hey, you probably didn't know this, but you've either got to have ventilation, or you've got to somehow, this can't just be this window in the middle of the house, this room right in the middle of the house. But I would think it would be reasonable to say, you gotta fix that, I'll be back in 30 days to sort it out. If you don't have it fixed in 30 days, then, you know, I mean, as a landlord and having bought some interesting places, I didn't know all the rules. And then, you know, but when I'm told that those are the rules, then I know that, oh, I have to change that.
Well, one of the reasons I suggested that we do this, what you're doing, well, creating this ordinance, is so that landlords aren't surprised. And I did when I, first year I was a health officer, I found this young fellow living in a, I hate to call it an apartment, but I guess that's what it was made for, in a garage that was designed to house trucks and equipment. So the owner had made this area in the back, you had to walk through the bays to get to it. So there's no windows in it, there was no exit from it except a door. So in order for him to get out, if there's a fire in there, he had to go through the fire. There's absolutely no ventilation in the building, in the bathroom, nothing. The only thing he had to depend on was electrical lights. And his heat was a space heater. That's what he was living in.
Okay, but,
So
so
when
if
I
you go in and you
approached,
check it out,
well, yes, and I can do that anywhere with any
Right.
codes. But the purpose of this, so when I approached that landlord and said, this cannot be an apartment for human habitation, wow. Wow. I almost had to take the town's lawyer after him because, it took me probably a week and a half to bring together all the codes and
There's
actually,
like a lot of what she's talking about.
then pull it together and bring it to him and say, you're breaking the law. Here it is.
The what?
The minimum
The minimum
standards covers
standards
a lot of what she's
cover
talking
that.
about.
No, they don't cover it at all. It's very subjective.
I
The
mean-
electrical will be safe.
So it sounds like if we, right now, if we tried to put, 30 pages of standards, some of us would be happy. And if we tried to do a piece this big that said all applicable codes and regulations shall apply, some others of us would be happy. So I guess we've got maybe,
But I think what you're saying is like, if she finds something and you give them 30 days to fix it, and they don't fix it, then you fall into the fine area. But
Yeah.
or how many ever days
But
to
what
do.
in the ordinance tells her she can go into and grab a hold of and enforce what she needs to do?
Well, that's in your first,
No, that's in our ordinance.
right, in your
Yeah.
ordinance would be in your first paragraph that says you must apply with the building,
All
the
existing.
building code, or whatever codes you wanna follow, you gotta put that in your first paragraph like they do here. We're gonna follow the town of Tilton's zoning ordinance, their building codes, and, if you wanna add life safety codes, I think it's redundant. You're gonna have that in your very first paragraph. We're gonna follow 48A plus the building codes, what, you have to determine what those are. We're gonna follow these codes, but you can't hold them to be, you have to give them some period of time, based on what it is, like she was saying, like 7 days or 14 days of, there's 10 bags of garbage, you need to do that within a week. It's not rocket, that's not gonna take you that long to do, you gotta,
just frayed
You know.
electrical wires, that's a
Right.
huge issue, that needs to be
Right.
fixed immediately, there's a fire gonna happen.
Well, and I'm thinking of what you were talking about, an interior room with no ventilation would be something that, I don't know how many of you have worked with carpenters, but I know a lot of them that just don't come when they're supposed to. And there needs to be some kind of recognition that the landlord may be making a really good effort to fix things, and if he has to hire someone to do it,
That's
then
what
we need to
we-
She
recognize
said
that
30 days
that's.
or otherwise agreed upon specified time.
Right.
With the state, with the state
Right.
for section 8, we can say we're making a reasonable effort.
Yeah,
And prove that we have.
yeah,
And-
yeah.
Right,
And they let it
Yeah.
go.
plumbers, electricians, they're hard to get.
Tim?
I don't know if everybody still has the town of Durham, their housing standards. So I just really like the first page, and the first thing that they have is enforcing authority.
fire
So that's
chief.
his at a glance, though, that's not really.
Well, I'm just.
Well, no, he's on the,
Are you at?
he's not on the attic glance.
No.
Oh, I see, alright.
So it just, and we're talking authority, and this might kind of give us an example. It talks about enforcing authority, powers of the enforcing authority. Obviously, use the fire department here for that example. But I kind of like how that lays it all out.
I like it too because it's in language that's more easily understood than some of the stuff that,
Does this one actually call in all the codes?
I think it's farther on in the document.
Okay.
But there's no reason why
Right.
you couldn't take
Right.
put it in there.
I mean, to me, if you say, all right, these guys have the authority, these guys have the authority to go in and do these periodic, sometimes periodic inspections, sometimes in response to complaint inspections. They have the authority to do these inspections. These inspections are conducted to determine compliance with such and such code, such and such regulation. Everyone has, that's one thing, saying that everyone has to come in and register with the land use office or the town clerk or whoever we decide, that's another key element. I feel like we all agree on these things, we made a lot of good progress on these things. We agree that there's gonna be fees and fines and that we don't wanna hammer those out all the way, but that we wanna continue to sort of at least include consideration of those as we go. Again, it seems to me we've made a tremendous amount of progress, and in a lot of ways, we're really down to how much detail does it, how much detail of actual standards, how much of the language that's housed in these massive stacks of code books do we want to filter into here? I know Pat was looking at the National Healthy Housing Standard there and recognizing that there are pieces that she would probably want to see go right into the ordinance. And I guess, Tim, I haven't had a chance to ask you, what would your thought be on, let's say, that section of the ordinance itself, not the checklist, but the ordinance itself that lists some amount of minimum standards? Would you like to see that kind of look like a reflection of the state's minimum standards, or would you like to see a little bit more detail in there, a little bit?
As far as the life safety code, all we do is the state fire code for standards. I mean, the fire district doesn't go above and beyond that. That's what the state has put out there, that's what we've adopted, that's what we follow. So I personally, as far as the life safety side of things, would not want to put anything above and beyond that.
Would you want to pull out any, so you wouldn't want to say, including, you can't have,
Or, you
Whatever.
wanna
We're
spell
talking about-
out, you have to have smoke detectors
Oh.
with CO.
yeah, do you want to actually have any of those?
You know what, I think maybe a paragraph just stating that you as a property owner must meet the life safety standards involved in the state fire code. And I think that the kind of the town of Durham does that with some of the stuff. And it's just a general paragraph saying, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve, it's about what.
If you reference, all they do is reference the codes, they don't
Right.
spell it, they don't need to spell any of them out, because they go and they tell them when they go and inspect. And,
Right.
like, if we reference section 48, and that has a good chunk of it, I wouldn't read, like, some of these, like, go,
We need
okay,
to put it in there.
they reference it, and then they put it in again, of like, can't be infested with rodents or insects, and it's like, it's already in 48A. Like, that part's already there, there's a lot of, so it's, I think it's saying the same thing that you don't need to say. If there's something that's not in here, like, something that I found that wasn't in here was overcrowding. Like, you shouldn't have 10 people in a,
well, that's something I was gonna mention too, because
Right.
in the Durham one, it talks about overcrowding, but it doesn't tell you what overcrowding is.
Right, so that was the only one that I could personally think of that came up with, that's not listed in the 48A that I might wanna put in the ordinance to say, because I get that all the time. I get people show up, 6 people for a 1-bedroom apartment, it's like, what do you know?
So in the model ordinance that we were handed, the large one,
Is there something
are you guys really saying for once it starts in these, exterior property areas, exterior structure, interior structure, trash, rubbish and garbage, extermination, light, ventilation, and occupancy limitations. Light, ventilation, I don't know, toilet room, plumbing, electrical, there's a mechanical equipment. Are you saying, get all that out?
Yes.
Yes.
You're gonna have the
Yeah.
checklist, but if you have the
On the
checklist, if you have your
It should
checklist
be.
there, that your ordinance references a life safety, the life safety laws or whatever, see attached checklist for
Okay.
ideas or
I
whatever.
just wanna make sure that's what we're
Because
Yeah.
there's no point.
But
Yeah.
is
We
the
need to
checklist, is a checklist going to be enforceable?
Yes.
Well, wait. Yes, sorry, go ahead. I think that what the more enforceable aspect is the section in your ordinance where you say these are the applicable codes as amended, however you say it. And then the checklist becomes almost like a cheat sheet, a user-friendly, document, a guide. And that the enforcement authority isn't drawn from the checklist, it's drawn from the statement in the ordinance that says these codes as amended, is my thought.
How about, like you said, it's redundant to, then pick out certain ones we really, really like of the minimum standard or the fire code. Reference it and say, section whatever, 48, and actually put, which can be found at www. And then list the website and the link where they can go right to it and find that. And then in the next section say also Tilton Northfield, fire test, which can be found at such and such.
Right.
List the, whatever this, and then where it
See,
can
like
found.
with the fire department,
And then
you
you
can't
can say,
access
and
it.
also see, please see attached checklist for your reference.
Yeah, okay.
I can just see town meeting trying to vote on that, to pass an ordinance that says, we shall do such and such and such according to RSA, see this and nothing more, and then another paragraph, see this and nothing more.
That's
There's no-
exactly
that's a
what we
good
do with the
point.
fire
That's what we're
department, you
doing.
bring in
Good
your
point.
book of codes and say, you can't,
But you're
Otherwise,
not
you have
gonna,
to list it all.
Maybe just say, I like what you're trying to do everyone a favor and say,
Right.
create those easy avenues to find the information. I think Pat makes a good point. It almost creates the impression that,
Being sneaky.
yeah, you're being sneaky. Maybe it's best to just say, which are, the town can help you, or, contact code enforcement.
I think
Really,
that's a
people
good
that be
idea.
sneaky when you're actually giving them where to
because
find
the
it.
people at town meeting thought that the ordinance that we had was overkill. I don't necessarily disagree with that. So they wanted to create, the selectmen amended it so that we could have a committee to create an ordinance that would be more simplified, but still had enough information in there to be enforceable, and go back to them and say, okay, this is what we came up with. So their expectations are something of Hanover, Belmont,
Right.
something in that kind of document. Yes, I agree with referencing our RSAs and so on, but still have enough meat in the ordinance that says, this is what's going to be enforceable.
Add the ones from other ones that we like that's not in the minimum standard.
Right.
But it'll be so lengthy and long if, we all agree that we want all the minimum standards in there, yes? Right.
Yeah.
all you
And
have
we
to
all
do
want
is
the
list
fire ones in there,
RSA
yes,
48.
right. And then we'll also add other ones that, we want in there, but to, list something that's already listed
Yeah.
seems like.
Or to
we're
pick out the
Like
ones
Hanover
that-
doesn't have anything
If we were to
listed.
pick out the ones that we think are, important and put them in here, the danger then becomes that people think that,
Well,
oh, well,
that's
those are
the only
that's the only
ones.
ones I gotta
Right.
follow, okay, great.
So you're
And
better,
then-
like the fire department, don't list anything.
Don't
Just-
list anything and just reference it, but have it there,
Or list
have
them
it there
and then
for
under them
people.
put, under the category which you want to expand on, add the other ones.
Well, I
There's
think,
not that many there to list under minimum standards. So if you added them and then just added the ones that you wanted,
I think we're just
But
talking
no
about a
one
different
understands this.
format, I'm just saying,
One page.
we're saying the same thing, it's just,
Right.
we're talking about setting the page up differently.
Yeah.
We're both talking about this.
Because
minimum
Hanover-
and adding
if you
it,
look
I
at
was talking about doing
Hanover's-
it after.
If you look at Hanover's, it doesn't actually list any of them, it just says, this is, you know,
RSA.
RSA 48A,
And the building code
and the
is in
building
there.
codes, and
Well,
life safety
that's what I'm
codes,
talking
Right.
and the zoning ordinance.
I have to say, to me, I'm having trouble seeing why that doesn't work, but I
No, I think it does work.
no, I know, but I think, we've gotta understand that, Pat and Catherine have unique experience with this, and they're, I think we have to hear that they're saying that they're worried that that's just not enough.
I think if you list it and then have your checklist, your user-friendly part, then town people can see, okay, we're listing all this, this is not necessarily all, this isn't everything on the checklist, but these are the main great big ones that we're gonna be looking at. These are the main things we usually see that are violations, and this is our main checklist, but there may be some other things, you just can't list them all because the codes are huge. You
Well,
just
and the
can't do it.
scuttlebutt that I was hearing, both before and during the town meeting, was that just the word building code scared the living bejesus out of people, because they had visions of having to do $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of repairs to their older buildings. And they didn't know what bringing it up to code would mean, and that really needs to be defined for them before they're gonna pass an ordinance. Because they have visions, the ones I talked to and heard from had visions of having to basically tear down their building and start from scratch.
I think people need to understand, we all have to follow these laws anyway, whether it's in this ordinance or not, we're all subjected to them. So if Catherine or anybody came out there and did an inspection, whether we have this ordinance or not, I still have to follow them. This is just making it an easy place for everybody to find.
But I think we
Well, it doesn't have
it
authority.
scared people to read. Now, this blue one that we presented at town meeting was very scary to a lot of people. I think you could attest to that, because you got a lot of phone calls. Pat, young, got a lot of phone calls. Is that his last name? Yeah, Clark, thank you. He got a lot of phone calls. People are just like, were panicked. They saw it and they panicked. And what we need to come up with is something that isn't gonna put them in that panic mode, that's got what we need to have in it without having people get scared to death of it.
And that's why I think it's a smaller, easier to read document. Like you were saying, the user-friendly words that, because this scared me just trying to read it, because I don't understand what it means, you know?
Just trying to read it
But
scared
like
me.
but again, going back to Hanover, it's very easily written, and it just hits the high points, and you have to follow the laws anyway.
Right.
I almost feel like we're ready, this is going on a limb saying this, that we're ready to pull together something to work off of, so that we're not, I don't think any of us, I don't know, I feel like working off the, is it Pittsfield?
Yeah, no.
Is, I just don't feel like that's where the board, that's where we make our most efficient strides.
I said that the first day.
You did, and you said it at the last meeting too. I wonder, I almost feel like I could pull together what I think is what I'm hearing from folks with, establishing, sorry to be redundant, but, establishing the requirement that people come in and register, big one, establishing the authority and making it clear that there's going to be an inspection regimen and inspection schedule. And then my thought would be, some of the other things, maybe put some loose language with fees that we know is going to be changed and that we're going to work on. And then delineate the minimum standards.
You mean spell them out? Or just reference them?
Spell out the minimum standards. So let's take an example of,
I think that's redundant.
well, but okay, but what about, 72.3 on Durham? it's got letter A and B. What if it were something so simple as that?
It would need to be more clear, though. I've got a lot of notes in here that I need you to expand it on and.
Okay, but what if I did that? What if I just took Durham's and said, there's the minimum standards, and then, maybe put in, I don't know, I'll look at the others and see what, maybe some language about appeals and, appeals and complaints, setting procedures for complaints, and then circulate it among the group, and we start working off of that. And maybe where we focus our energy is on that minimum standard section, getting that to be, again, I think some of us would like that to be this big, and others would like to have it maybe be more 10 pages long, and start sort of, fighting that one out. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that
I'd like
approach?
it to be about 2 pages long.
Can
Okay.
you take the
Yeah.
minimum standards from here, the actual state minimum standards,
That's-
and rework on this? Because when I look at
I think
just
that's
the
word
one that.
for
They're
word.
open to interpretation.
Doesn't
But
it?
when I look at the one, the Durham 72-3,
Okay, Durham,
And
maybe
I
that's
say-
not the best example.
and I say, and I look at number 2, I'm just giving you an example where it says lack of reasonable adequate ventilation, light, or sanitary facilities. That is not in the
That's
state
clear.
minimum standards.
And it's not clear either.
Okay,
Right, so they did
who
what
had
we're
the minutes?
talking
Someone
about,
had
adding
them,
to it.
darn it.
Well,
I got it
no,
right here.
No,
Durham
one
has
of
them
these
too in
towns,
V.
it was it,
Yeah, they list them all
Oh.
in V, and like I said, it's
Exeter?
redundant.
Exeter. That, do they have, are those word for
What do you
word?
mean from Hanover on that one?
Hanover just lists, no, this is Durham.
Durham.
Hanover just says, we're gonna follow RSA 48A14.
Right.
And it's like, right here.
Right
But
there.
Right.
Yeah, but the
I mean,
problem with
not
that
just
is,
that, they
why not,
also,
why not at least give people that much? And say, rodents, holes in the ceiling,
like, you can just copy this and
This-
hand it out.
that's what I mean.
The
Right.
Like,
Durham
who,
one,
is it Exeter? Somebody
Just
did
part
it.
of the package.
Hold on, I'll second.
the
Because I got
Durham
'em all.
one is actually, it sounds very similar to the HUD.
Exeter
Some of
did.
them do.
Exeter is the one who pulled the state one with the
The minimum standards.
Okay.
Well, they added, the following substandard conditions as specified in RSA 48A14 and as amended for rental units shall not occur in any dwelling units within the town of Exeter.
I like
And then it
that,
goes
too.
A, and then all the way down to J. And then under the next one, it just says minimum standards, period, just the language, minimum standards.
Okay.
Yeah, I marked that one as being, I
Okay.
liked it.
So, I don't know, I'm willing to do that if you guys think that would
Because
be a
there's
good
more,
way
I
to
think you
proceed.
said, because there's more explanation
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, the other one is like,
And that
so
goes with
what
the
does
education.
uncleanliness mean? What you might consider unclean, somebody else might
Right.
think it's clean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so open,
We can't
be
it's
getting
so
into that.
subjective.
Okay, so, what if I did,
Extras
What-
is not Durham.
no, yeah, what if I did what I was saying and used Exeter and put that in as the, sort of the technical standards piece?
So you're saying, so you're gonna create like the first line that has
Mhm.
like your authority,
Right.
purpose, put your building code,
Yeah.
zoning code, all that,
Yeah.
and then go with registration.
Yeah, yeah,
And then from registration, add in the minimum standards,
Yeah.
explanations, and then go to fines, fees.
fees and fines, and then,
And then
complaints, appeals.
Appeals,
Yeah,
right?
and,
Yeah.
and
And
hand
then,
that out and
and
start
then
working on
inspections,
that.
and then you'll have an attached inspection guide. You
okay,
should say
yeah.
guide,
Yeah,
not checklist, you should say guide, because a
Yeah,
guide
guide
means,
would be
it's
good.
kinda like, it's not all inclusive, but it's a guide.
yeah,
In fact, maybe we
Right.
could put something like that would shall include but not be limited to.
yeah,
Right. It's
But
just
I like the way that Exeter is spelled out.
it is good.
Yeah, I
Right.
do too.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think, Exeter?
I do like it.
I like the way that they spelled out the enforcement of the house, well, they call it a housing code enforcement officer. But it would be,
Right.
but they kind of gear it towards, if there's a complaint suspected, upon receiving the notice of the suspected violation of the code, is hereby authorized to take such steps as appropriate under 48A 1 to 13 to enforce the provisions of this code.
Yeah, I think this is very well written.
And so it kind of, that's the part I liked about Exeter, is that piece here under 2205,
Okay.
1 to 4.
Which references it, and like I said, this
Under
48A is a
administration.
short
Yeah.
document that's
I
easily
got it
read.
highlighted, I was looking at
Yeah.
it today, I agree. All right, I'll do that then, if that's what we agree, and really, we can, I mean, I can put that together, send it out, folks can start putting, I'll see if I can get it, put together, well, hopefully, a couple weeks in advance of our next meeting, folks can come with notes, and we can go from there, if you guys wanna do that.
The.
Tim, what do you think, does that sound good?
Yeah, I think it was a good platform there.
Okay,
Start with-
Jenny, what do you
I do
think?
too.
Yeah, I think that's good. Can I put 2 cents on the fee thing? I'm not gonna spend
Please.
a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
Because some violations can be tenant caused, and because landlords don't have a legal right to do any inspections prior, I don't know if it would be entirely fair to have fee before the 30-day, even though we are supplying them with this, and, part of me wants to say, well, you've had this, so you should know it. But you
Yeah.
don't always know it,
No,
because it's tenant
right.
caused, so, I think, to be fair, it should be fees start coming after a 30-day or other reasonable specified time, whether it's 7, 30, or 40, whatever. When you go in, you find a violation, then that inspector and the landlord can agree on the timeframe for them to fix what needs to be fixed. And then if it's not done with that agreed upon time, then we start imposing some fines.
Okay.
Because tenants can cause the problem, and because landlords don't have a legal right to know ahead of time, that would be entirely fair.
I do too.
The, on the checklist, like I would definitely, like if Belmont says a good start to it, like on the water damage, we put like rot, or I would say, but it's not just floors, like you could have water damage on ceilings.
Oh, right.
So it would,
Yeah.
it's kind of be like, no water damage would mean like, I know what you, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
To where
Right, but try to word it to the
structural
straight.
integrity of the wood itself.
Right,
Well,
is like
structural
what-
integrity
To create a
or-
safety hazard or.
Right, dripping into your,
I just found the HUD inspection thing.
Oh.
It's fairly well spelled out.
Would you mind emailing?
Just did that.
Oh, okay.
Then-
Nice.
do it to the
Right now,
household so we all get
no,
it.
I just did
Right
delete because I
now?
wasn't sure if I
And
allowed
you
to
send us an email, can I
Okay.
come
Yeah.
down here and get a hard copy
Yeah.
before the meeting?
Just
Yeah,
send me the
definitely,
information.
definitely, yep.
But if
Can
it's illegal
you-
for us
I had just a
to
question
respond
on
to
the
you.
Well, there it is.
vehicle outdoor storage.
Okay.
Like, can you enforce any of that? Like, we have a lot in Northfield, like, there's all kinds of places that have just tons of vehicles and scrap and stuff and junkyards, and I think they've tried to tell them they can't do that, but they've
Oh.
lost and.
No, I think Al, our code enforcement officer, has, enforced and, actually, prevailed in court, or, I don't know, actual, used applicable, or used legal avenues
Yeah.
and gotten things done. I don't know, Catherine could probably
He's
tell you
very
more about it.
successful at it, there's a state law
Yeah.
that, and I don't remember, because that, he enforces that. There's a
Right.
minimum number of unregistered
Right.
vehicles, and if you're actively demoing them in your yard, you're now a junkyard. If you don't have a license, you can't do it.
What's our group email?
Housing@tiltonnh.org, I think.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. When I type in HOU and it comes right up, so, yeah, okay. All right, so I guess, if that's our plan of action, I personally don't see much purpose in going a lot further tonight unless folks disagree. Ms. Alden, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything you wanted to mention?
No, the only thing I was gonna say earlier, this is your area of expertise. You have a lot of experience in ordinances and planning and so on and so forth. And I know from my experience with you on the planning board that sometimes it's very easy to flop around and get a lot of input. And you have always come across by doing what you're planning to do now and presenting us with a document that is well written, it's very professional and very user friendly. So, I'm glad to see that you're doing it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I asked you to speak. Give you your $20 after the meeting. Okay. So I guess if we want to move on to other business, Jim.
Just, I know someone mentioned it earlier in the meeting. I think it's great that we'll have that platform to work with. If maybe we can have that projector, we
Okay.
can have that document if we want to at least add, cut and paste,
Okay.
maybe, amend whatever we need to do to it.
Okay.
As a group instead of us all taking individual notes.
Okay.
For the next meeting, that might be more helpful.
So there we go.
Your laptop.
Next meeting, we are ready. Actually, I told you I didn't think we'd be ready for that.
Priority board idea.
At least then it's recorded and no one has to retype it.
Yeah.
So otherwise you can take pictures of it and retype it.
I don't. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Did we forget to accept the notes from last time?
No, we're about to move on to other business, but Tim wanted to mention that
Okay.
thing about bringing the projector, which I think is,
I have a portable one.
A
okay.
projector.
All right.
Probably would need a projector, we got a computer,
Okay.
so people with a computer.
Okay.
You can just.
You might have
Yeah.
more attendance if you put it out there, like what's on the agenda, like a little sooner than the day before.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Okay.
Don't put it out there.
Well,
Yeah.
if you're gonna be like, all right, we're gonna have a base document to work from, there might be more people to show up other than, listening to us pass
Alright,
stuff
well.
around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want people's input so you
Oh,
know
I know.
when
Just
you
kidding.
get to town meeting,
No, you're right.
yeah.
The legal requirement is an agenda posted in two places, 24 hours or more before the meetings. But yeah, I felt for now, just at least meeting the legal requirements was good, but you're right. As we get going, we're gonna need more and more public input. We're not gonna wanna be blindsided at our public hearings, so, thank you, you're right, efforts should
Like,
be
we
made.
can see if we were meeting, I'm
Advertising
like,
the agenda?
What's
As
that?
well, we've discussed advertising the agenda a little bit to get it out so that, people could
Yeah.
get interested and.
I know. I feel as we
It's a
go,
good thing
we
Jane
should,
praised it.
we should accelerate our advertising as
It
we
can be said
accelerate
nice
our
things.
progress.
Our minutes, our
I agree.
video is posted almost immediately the next day, depending on what Tim has to do, but there are a lot of people in town that are watching that, a lot.
It would be nice to get them to come to,
You can watch it at home.
I did
come
once and I
before
shut
and
it
not
off.
after.
What's that?
It'd be nice to get them to come before the meeting and not after the meeting, we need their
Yeah.
comments
Ms.
at the
Alden?
meeting.
Yeah, I just think it might be dangerous in view of what happened at town meeting and the uproar that people had over this and prior to town meeting, to have too many people here before you have a working document.
That's kind of,
Yeah.
Caution.
that's what I feel, again, kind of saying, as we sort of, blossom, we should say, hey, come look at us.
We're getting a lot closer though.
We are. When I listen to the tapes of these meetings, it's you can see these moments, or hear these moments where, we just sort of, we sort of burst through these barriers one by one, and I think we are making good progress, definitely. Okay, so if that's all, we can move on to reviewing the May 3rd minutes. I did misspell Lisa's name on the last page, so that's one correction that needs to be made. Also, I can't believe I did this, but I did not include Ms. Alden as an attendee at last meeting, so I will certainly make that edit. And other than that,
Yes, I will.
No, not in April,
I was here at the last meeting.
that was May.
We're talking about the.
yeah, man, I put
I was not here in April. I didn't know I was allowed. Catherine told me I couldn't come.
any other,
The minutes stated I was gonna try to bring a list of, we have rental properties.
oh, is that not true?
No, that is true, I brought the list.
Oh, you did bring a list?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So we have a list.
I don't know how current it is, I think the last time I got from the town until
Alright.
3 years
Now,
ago.
are you talking about them registering twice, like registering
No.
at the clerk and then registering?
No, we'll have
at-
to hammer that out. No, I think it should be once. Cindy and I are, you know, not close to each other, and there's no reason, and it's not just Cindy and Al, you know, all of us are in the same building,
Right.
and there's no reason we can't be, you know, one person receiving them and then
Tracing
transferring.
that's right from.
Put it to
from
a master
here,
list,
so-
Yeah.
that the
yeah.
health and building and everybody can work off of.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. All right, any other, if there are no other corrections to the minutes, I guess I'd accept a motion to approve as amended.
Make a motion to approve.
All right, second from Lisa. And all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I'm abstaining because I
Oh.
wasn't here.
All right, any other discussion, anything, any other news, current events, anything bring up, show and tell? If not, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
You're not-
We're good for motions and seconds.
Right.
so it's
Very
under the
good, yeah.
table.
16 prospects, so 2 years now.
All in favor?
It's 3 years old.
Aye.
All right, great job, thank you guys.
And what is gas meter protection?
I look at the checklist. Hold on. I don't know. I got mine.
Well, it has like number them.
Gas, propane, gas.
Oh, those are those things
Yeah,
that go
so-
around like a bike rack?
So